Hi readers, welcome to Novels with Nat. I don't typically do sort of book reviews where I talk about one singular book or book chats about one singular book, but every once in a while there's a book that I just feel like I want to talk about and that I feel like I want to see what other people are thinking about it. So I finished this book yesterday, and so I thought I would just sit down and talk about it a little bit while the ideas are kind of fresh in my mind. And that book is Half His Age by Jennette McCurdy. So we're going to get into my thoughts on this book. I'm going to just start off by saying this book is not one that I would recommend, but I gave it 5 stars. So I absolutely loved Jennette McCurdy's memoir. I thought it was one of the most well-written memoirs I've ever read. I just love the writing of it. And so I was very interested to pick up her first debut fiction novel. And so I did. I picked it up on the day it was released. And so let's talk a little bit about the synopsis. In this book, we are basically following our main character named Waldo. She is a 17-year-old high school student, and she ends up in a sort of relationship with one of her teachers who is twice her age, or she is half his age, however you want to think about it. So it's a pretty dark sort of premise. And so we're just following her as she's navigating these really strange feelings and relationships, and there's just a lot of commentary going on in the book. And so that's just kind of the general premise. I don't want to go too deep into the actual what goes on in the book and stuff. I want to keep this completely spoiler free. So we're basically following a main character who is an underage high school student who is in a relationship with a teacher. So that being said, I think before you jump into this book, definitely do what you have to do. Check your trigger warnings. See if this is a book that you would be okay reading or that you want to read. There are a lot of dark themes in this one, so just be warned. I have actually seen Jennette McCurdy going on a bunch of different talk shows. I think she was on Call Her Daddy podcast. I've seen a lot of videos like that going around, and I've saved some of them, but I intentionally didn't want to watch any of those videos prior to reading the book. So now that I've read the book, I'll probably go back and watch some of those and hear a little bit about her thought process and what she was going through when she was writing it. But I have not watched any of those yet. So I went into this book just completely blind so that I could go about it kind of forming my own opinions and my own thoughts and sort of thinking about it and critiquing it with a clear mind. So that's what I did. So now let's get into my reading experience and my general thoughts on this one. I will say this book made me viscerally uncomfortable. I think that was her intention. I think just based off of the cover alone, as well as the book itself, I think the intention was to make readers very uncomfortable, and she did that successfully. I was uncomfortable the entire way through to the point that I could only read this book in small little sections. I couldn't sit down for a couple of hours and just read it straight. It was just very heavy. It made you feel kind of icky and gross, and you just didn't want to read it for too long, but it was kind of like a train wreck that you just can't look away from. Kind of to the point where I felt like towards the end of the book, probably the last 50 pages, I was just ready for it to wrap up. I had kind of reached my threshold of the topic and just the dark nature of it. And so I think her intention was to make the reader feel that visceral discomfort in kind of two ways. I felt it in obviously the content and the synopsis and what's going on in the story, in that sense, but also in terms of the writing itself. It was very, I would say, blunt and crass and almost a little bit vulgar. And so I think that was also being used, the language itself. There was no sugarcoating. There was nothing. It was just very blunt, very to the point, and the writing also was what added to the discomfort. I also found it interesting. I think it was a very strategic choice and a good one, where throughout the entire book, our main character, Waldo, even while she's in this relationship with this teacher, refers to him as Mr. Corgi. I guess she doesn't refer to him as his first name like you would if you're in a relationship with someone. I think that was an interesting choice. It really showed that power dynamic, and that also was a little bit icky. So this book talks about a lot of themes that I think are really important and relevant, but also that can be hard to read about. It talks about sex and consumerism and beauty standards, manipulation, abuse. All of these really big, broad themes are kind of wrapped up into this book, and I really liked her commentary on a lot of these topics. So the one thing that I loved about this book was the writing. If you liked the writing in I'm Glad My Mom Died, it's a very similar style. You can definitely tell it's Jennette McCurdy's writing. It was very similar, and I loved that. I feel like the writing really reflected the tone of the book and the voice of the main character. It was just very it's kind of a strange combination in the best possible way of being very direct and to the point, but then also poetic in the comparisons and meanings and metaphors she makes. I just really love that sort of combination, and I was just hooked on the writing from page one, and I could tell that that was going to be something I really connected with. And so I did save a few quotes that I found interesting just to give you some examples of the kind of writing that I'm talking about. So here's one where she's sort of talking about beauty standards. I sit on that line that so many sit on, the line between beautiful and not. I can reach it on a good day, during the follicular phase of my cycle, if I didn't sleep on my face, with just the right amount of plucking and primping, and a great hair day, and God's grace during my makeup routine. It's the line that keeps me even more stuck on the hamster wheel of the pursuit of beauty, even more dependent on makeup tutorials and tips and tricks videos and that perfect cream bronzer, because anything could be the thing that makes the difference between me being beautiful and not. And so this next one is one that also I thought was interesting. She was writing sort of about class and poverty. So she says, he's been impressed by me writing about where I come from, but seeing it live in person is a different thing. People worry poorness will rub off on them, and the bad taste that comes with it. They'll read a book about it, or watch a movie where Jennifer Lawrence pretends to be poor while her $800 highlights gleam in her close-ups. But they don't want to actually know it, to be close to it in any kind of real way, except maybe cutting a check for a grand or two around the holidays to the Salvation Army or the Red Cross. But is that even exposing themselves to it really? Or just a way of distancing themselves from it even more? So it's like these kind of things that I'm talking about where she's talking about a major sort of social issue or theme. And I just really thought the way that she describes it was poignant, but also succinct while also being sort of literary. I don't know, it's hard to describe, but I just really love her writing. I have one more saved that I'll read. This one kind of highlights the really uncomfortable feeling. I'm not going to read any quotes that have anything super crass or vulgar, but this quote that I picked is clean, but it really kind of highlights the general sort of uneasiness that you get when you're reading this. In this one, her and the teacher are out for dinner at a restaurant. And she says, Mr. Corgi and I ordered 2 desserts, a 7-layer cake and a creme brulee. We crack the creme brulee and we eat the cake, and Mr. Corgi pays the tab, and he doesn't even have to count on his fingers to know how much to tip. We scooch out of the booth, and a hostess taps Mr. Corgi on the arm and says, I just have to let you know that you seem like such a good dad. Like, ew. Like, that is just the way that she ends her chapters. Like, all of her chapters seem to end in a way that really makes you have an emotion or a thought, and I just love ending each chapter like that. Like, that was the end of a chapter. And it just, I don't know, I just really enjoyed the writing. So those are just some examples. So my only major critique of the book would be that I felt like our main character Waldo was not reading as a 17-year-old. It felt more like she was a much older woman that was sort of giving her perspective on this stuff that was happening when she was younger with a lot more clarity and understanding than perhaps a 17-year-old would have. And so I felt like that was a little bit of a mismatch. I think perhaps it would have been more interesting if it was written as Waldo from the future, sort of telling this in past tense of what happened, because then you could really dive into that sort of perspective and social commentary and all of that, which she did in the book, but I just kind of felt like a little bit of a mismatch, just because our main character is only 17 and is a teenager. So my overall thoughts on this book. I am going to read anything that Jennette McCurdy puts out. I think she is an outstanding writer, both in the fiction and nonfiction genres. That being said, I cannot say that I enjoyed my reading experience with this. I don't feel right about saying I loved the book or I enjoyed the book or I would even recommend the book. I don't think I would do that. That being said, this book is 5 stars for me, which is such an odd thing to say. I think there are very few books where I wouldn't recommend it, but it was 5 stars. I think perhaps, I've never read the book A Little Life, but I've heard people sort of share similar sentiments about that book, where it feels wrong to give it anything less than 5 stars, but it's not one that you would want to put on to other people. And that's kind of how I feel about this book. So I gave it 5 stars because the writing was outstanding. It made me think a lot. It also is one that's stuck with me and I think will continue to stick with me. It's definitely going to be a standout from a year of reading for sure. That being said, it's a very heavy book. It's a very uncomfortable book. And if you're the type of person that only wants to read for enjoyment, this probably isn't the book for you. It's not an enjoyable read, but it's one that makes you think. So that's kind of it. Just a quick video to talk about this book. I really want to hear from anyone in the comments. If you, number one, have read this book, what did you think? What was your rating? And just give me some of your general thoughts or critiques. I would really love to know. Also, if you have not read this book, do you plan to read it or is it on your TBR? Just let me know in general. Anything you have to say about this book, drop it in the comments. I did also forget to mention that I sort of tandem read this one with the physical book along with the audiobook, which I did like because the audiobook is narrated by Jennette McCurdy herself. And I thought she does a good job narrating it. So I think, in summary, read this book or not at your own discretion. I'm not suggesting it or recommending it, but pick it up if it's something that you are inclined to. So that's it for this video, just a quick one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video very soon. Bye.